minutes about how this was the first piece we looked
funny
at.
when you were a stupid
and you
kid.
recorded it, and like you can hear it on our first album, and the whole point of this video is that we're releasing it next week. I think that's hilarious.
Oh, let's see. What would Justin say? You're so pretty.
Oh yeah, Justin would be like, you're so pretty. Oh man.
Oh my gosh.
Oh Justin, that's so funny. I'll make sure I include John in that email too. Make sure we set that.
Are we rolling? We've been rolling. You just got to
Oh man.
Pure gold.
Now we definitely have to tell John and Justin. You're so pretty. That's so funny. All right. Masters of vlogging. Here we go.
Oh my god.
Are you ready for this? What are we doing?
What are we talking about next?
I don't know. You want to do tuning?
Tuning.
Let's do tuning
Lute
part 1.
tuning.
Lute tuning. Okay, wait.
Because
We
we
have
don't
to,
have to tune
wait,
the voice.
Oh man, yeah. We should do our intro though.
Hi, I'm Paul Sánchez.
And I'm Loud and Shuit.
And we're
Bedlam! Alright, today's episode is going to be part 1 of a tuning episode.
Because you need more than one part to tune the lute. Ba-dum!
Voulez ouïr chanson composée et nouvelle des garçons des faubourgs qui aiment bien à boire. Drelin, drelin, dan, 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 drelin, drelin, dan, dan, dan.
I'm just going to ask her to leave the room because she doesn't even bother tuning. So, there we go. Oh! And the soprano knocked over her water. At least it wasn't on stage this time.
You can't make this up.
Sorry. So, we had somebody request in the comment section that I talk a little bit about lute tuning. And I thought it'd be a good idea to do 2 parts. The first part is going to be talking a little bit about the theory of tuning and why we use different tuning systems. And then part 2 will be about the practical element of, how to tune a lute, how to do it on stage, how to do it at home.
One string at a time.
One string at a time, yeah. I can't, well, I guess I could turn 2 pegs at the same time, but I couldn't also pluck them at the same time. It would work. Maybe it would help, I don't know.
If you had someone else plucking for you.
I think so, yeah. I think that's fine though. I'll do 1 peg at a time. So, a lot of people play instruments and are musicians, like sopranos, and they may be unaware of why we use the tuning systems that we do today. Like, for example, some of you may have heard of things called like equal temperament, or you might have heard of just intonation, or
Praetorius.
Praetorian? No, that's like a recorder model. That's like a silly way of saying, 6 comma mean tone. So you may have heard of mean tone or Pythagorean tuning or things like that. So the reason we have all of these different tuning systems is that there is a perfect way to tune every single interval. Every single interview could be tuned. That's interesting. But there is a way to perfectly tune every interval. And we would call that acoustically in tune. And basically, the problem is when we start mixing notes, either in a harmonic fashion, something that singers can't do, or if we have melodic material over a sustained note, we run into problems. We can't use the perfect tuning. But let's talk a little bit about what is the perfect tuning. If you take a single string, so if we were to just take my high string here, and if we were... The chanterelle, the singing string. And if I were to divide that string exactly in half, and I were to press it down, so that now half of that string length, so if you take a ruler and you measure the string length, you get the whole string length here, and I put my finger down here, and now this part is going to vibrate. So the ratio of the string is 1/2. Then what you end up getting is the octave. So, open G, and then you get the G above it. Boom, that's really cool, right? So how do we get our other intervals? By putting our finger down in different places and changing the ratio of what part of the string is vibrating. So if I, for example, were to cover 1/3 and allow 2/3 to ring out, we get a perfect fifth above G. And if I were to cover 1/4 and allow 3/4, I would get a perfect fourth. So each of the intervals, as you go down the neck, has a sort of perfect ratio. And it's these really clean ratios, like 1/2, 2/3, 3/4. Sounds really, really beautiful. And in fact, for the thirds and sixes, it's the same thing. The problem is, if we use those ratios exactly in the context of harmonies, and in the context of maybe moving voices, there's no way to have them all perfect. So what we have to do then is we have to come up with compromises. And there are a number of different systems that you can use. Now, if you're just a solo singer, no instrument accompanying it, technically, she could do all perfect intervals. You want to demonstrate? No, I'm just joking. I'm just joking. Yeah. You spent your whole life singing in equal temperament and 6-comma mean tone. How about on the spot, just do just intonation of a minor second? That would be really, so the issue, of course, arises that if you are more than a melodic instrument, even if you are a drone, if you just have a drone note going in the background, and she's singing over that drone, we have to start compromising, because if you make one interval perfect, then the next one can't be quite perfect, and we run into all of these problems. Thank you for contributing a beautiful drone to this. A couple of so, for example, in the medieval period, they used something called Pythagorean tuning. Particularly on the continent. There's some question about whether on the British Islands they were actually using that, and we'll talk about that maybe in another episode. But Pythagorean tuning, you make sure that the perfect fourths and fifths are perfectly tuned. So they're those beautiful ratios we were talking about. And then the thirds and sixes are quite out of tune from their perfect ratios. And so what's kind of cool is when you look at a lot of medieval music, you realize, oh, they're using those imperfections to create cadences. So you'll see major sixes that are really tense, and then they resolve out to octaves, or minor sixes, and they're really tense, and they resolve into perfect fifths. Now, by the time we get to the period of music that Kayleen and I specialize in, there was this thing called Continence Anglaise, and there was this English style that was coming across and influencing the continent, and it really kind of picked up steam in the 15th century, and it was kind of two things simultaneously. It was a writing style and it was a tuning system. So if you think about it, Renaissance music really likes to emphasize thirds and sixes. So if I'm moving along, I might have these sort of things, really nice imperfect harmonies.
Sounds like Blackbird.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you have the little bit of the leg. Yeah. So the Beatles influence the whole way. So the issue then becomes, if you want to write music that emphasizes thirds and sixes, those need to be in tune. And you'll notice that in Renaissance music, the big indicator for cadences is a suspended fourth. So for example, we've talked about this a little bit in some other things, but so that's going to be kind of your standard run-of-the-mill cadential material for the Renaissance. So the tuning system that we use in the 16th century and for the repertoire we're mostly working with is called mean tone. And there's a couple different ways of doing mean tone. Essentially, it's what's called a temperament, and a temperament is like a real compromise. It means that we're going to distribute the out-of-tuneness across multiple intervals, and then we're going to distribute the in-tuneness across multiple, and just try to find a system that works. So if you are in what's called quarter comma mean tone, your thirds and sixes are really beautifully in tune, but your fifths and fourths are going to be pretty jarring. The system that I actually use is called 6 comma mean tone, And really, this is a very popular system to use because most things sound pretty good in it. And all it means is that compared to, for example, equal temperament, where everything's divided equally, my sixths and thirds are a little more in tune, and my fifths and fourths are a little less in tune. And this is all very nice in a theoretical setting. What Kayleen has to deal with is me actually doing this on the instrument. And because this video is sort of all about the theory of it, I'm also going to include some links below for people who want to get into the math. I'm not a physicist. I didn't do a degree in acoustics or anything like that. I just had to learn enough of this so that I could practically learn it on the instrument. But I'll include some links below for anyone who like really wants to get into all of the mathematics of why this works the way it does. So my plan for next week is to talk about, well, okay, so you've got this theoretical system where you have thirds and sixths that are a little more in tune or are pretty close to acoustically in tune, and then fifths and fourths that are a little less. That's the trade-off. But what do we do on the lute?
And what do we do when we're singing?
Yeah, that's the other thing.
I mean,
ignore it. Like, just go, plow straight forward. That's what singers do. I'm joking.
Wow. Okay. But I will say that a lot of times I will be practicing with the piano, and so my intervals won't be quite right when we get together to rehearse, and then I have to just readjust and make sure that I'm always listening. Imagine that.
Yeah, so if you're a singer, just be aware that the piano uses something called equal temperament, and all that means is that they took the octave and divided it evenly, so everything is kind of out of tune other than the octave, so we've just adjusted to it. But if you ever go up to a piano and play a major third and really listen, it's actually not a very comforting sound. If you just listen to it in isolation, it's actually there's beating going on. Yeah, and it's even worse when it's sung. So next week, I'll talk about how to tune by ear, how to tune with a tuning machine, what to do with your frets, because not only do we have to have a system that compromises theoretically, we have to deal with the problem that I have these frets, and if I have one note in tune on one fret and one string, I'm stuck with the angle. I'm stuck with the fret going on all the other strings. So I have to take another step in compromise. So next week in part 2 of tuning on the lute, I will talk about the practical elements. But if anyone has any questions, post them below. I'm not a physicist, so please, my maths aren't very good. So I'll try to do the best I can in that regard.
Please subscribe to our channel.
Like and subscribe, and see you next week.
Next time. Bye.